We have, as of August 1, a new interim leadership team coalescing. They have not yet met, but we invited them to offer sort of a very brief glimpse into what they care about, their vision for the conference. So grateful to God for those who stepped up, for these persons who stepped up with good energy and vision. We will hear from them in alphabetical order by first name. So I gave Caleb a heads up that he'll be first, and then we'll go on down the list. Craig, Maven, Dwayne Beck. Then comes, I had it somewhere, number 4 is June Miller, and then Bishop Leslie Francisco, and finally Maren Hange. Let me say just a brief word, since some of you may not read the news releases about who these people are. Caleb, we met yesterday, church relations and racial justice leader. He will be on this team at 50% of FTE in an expanded role. He has already been serving as VMC's racial justice and equality leader for a year. He's completing a Master of Arts in Religion at Eastern Mennonite Seminary in the coming year. Craig Maven has served in pastoral ministry for 40 years and continues as senior pastor at Harrisonburg Mennonite Church. He will become Minister of Administration and Church Relations on this team at a quarter time, 25% of an FTE. Dwayne Beck retired years ago, I'm not sure how many, but moved to the area 2 years ago. Retired after 45 years of pastoral ministry, but continues as a pastoral coach, spiritual director, and consultant to congregations. Dwayne will be consultant to pastors on leadership and local ministry on this team, serving at 15% of an FTE. June Miller has been on the team. Her role would be expanded to 75% as Director of Communication and Administration. She brings organizational experience from a variety of previous positions, nonprofits, including 2 years working in communications with Mennonite Church, Alberta. Bishop Leslie Francisco retired after some 32 years. I couldn't get the total number of primary pastoral leadership of C3 Hampton in 2020, but he and his wife Natalie continue as oversight pastors there. And Bishop Leslie Francisco will be Minister of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at 15% of an FTE. And Maren Hange, Maren has some 20 years in pastoral ministry, is co-pastor of Charlottesville Mennonite Church and co-district minister for Harrisonburg District, and she will serve as Minister of Formation and Soul Care at 25% quarter-time FTE. So this is the new team that is coming. We'll meet early in August, and we'll pick up leadership for the conference's ministries at that point. So let's hear from you in alphabetical order. Caleb first, and on down the line.
Hello again, everyone. Good morning. I'm quite honored and somewhat burdened to assume a leadership role in the conference this morning, and Sarah has spoken eloquently about that. This summer, I have often been called naive from a variety of people and for a variety of reasons. For believing that church organizations can and should stay in fellowship despite theological, geographical, racial differences. For believing that the church and church organizations have something to offer the world at all. And even from some of my peers for believing in Jesus. When asked why I care about the church, why I care about Jesus, I tend to return to the reality of the brokenness of the world. I remain heartbroken, as I know many of you are, over the reality of our world, over racism, wealth inequality, the wanton destruction of human life and of nature that too many people choose to simply ignore. Sin is real, and we as individuals in society are broken. We need God, and we need each other. For me, from the slums of Indonesia, the still broken society of Vietnam, to Latino and African American churches enduring in the face of daily struggle, I consider myself lucky to be in touch with some of this pain in our world. And this brokenness tends to lead me back to Jesus and back to the church. We must not forget here in North America, our brothers and sisters in faith around the world, but also here in the US, of course, that are not blessed with the financial and cultural stability that we do have. I hope to keep pushing VMC to follow this Jesus of the Gospels who stands with the marginalized and the immigrant, the poor, the widow, and the orphan. We must not forget that God's mission, our mission that unites us, is one of reconciliation and shalom for everyone. I believe in the church because I believe that the world is still in desperate need of generous, self-sacrificial peacemakers. Some people like to call them Christians. I hope VMC churches continue to be a part of this mission of God, being a part of the mission of reconciliation, Christ followers who build bridges over barriers, supporting one another in seeking to be some of God's hands and feet in the world. And I truly do have hope for VMC's ability to do this work. And of course, we together have the greatest hope of all, hope that by following the way and words of Jesus, we not only will someday be united with God, but that we may also model God's love to one another and to the world, bringing healed relationships wherever we go. So we may ask, what is this gospel that we share? We should not forget, it is good news. First and foremost, if it is not good news for the poor, it's not the gospel of Jesus. So moving forward, I want VMC to be a group of churches that take seriously the Christ-like and Anabaptist theological emphasis that do unite us. Radical love for enemies and for the least of these. Being unafraid to speak and act boldly for truth even when that's countercultural, unpopular, and perhaps even dangerous. And a willingness to work tirelessly and, yes, perhaps a bit naively for God's kingdom. These are high callings, but these are the ones which faithful Christians have always wrestled with for 2,000 years. I hope we remember that following Jesus doesn't always mean happy, fun, rich, easy times. In fact, as Scripture says, following Jesus actually means taking up a cross in radical hope. So I pray that I may help our conference move forward with love for one another and with love for all of God's people. May it be so.
Well, first let me say that I was deeply humbled and honored when asked to serve on this team. And I am also really blown away by the caliber of the people that I soon will be working with. I have experienced that the Lord calls me through the church, and that call is almost always confirmed by my wife. And I would be remiss in not saying that Wendy gave me a not so gentle shove that maybe I should say yes to this role, because it's a role I didn't want. In fact, what I wanted to do was to resist, refuse, and retreat. Yes, preachers always alliterate. But I've also learned that it's really hard to say no to the Holy Spirit. So my hope for VMC. Well, first of all, I have great hope that VMC will thrive and will flourish. My hope is that we engage even more deliberately in the mission of God. For those of you who were not at Tristle's 200-year celebration last night, you missed Elwood Miller, Elwood Yoder, speaking about the way Trissels and other Northern District congregations engaged in meaningful outreach and mission, both in their immediate communities and beyond. That's my hope for VMC. It was close to 30 years ago when I was serving on the Commission on Home Ministries of the General Conference Mennonite Church. Yes, I am one of those former GCs. The commission's job was to coordinate and initiate mission activity in North America, U.S. and Canada. Our agenda at that point was moving more and more toward what was then called integration, the joining together of the Mennonite Church and the General Conference Mennonite Church. And shortly before, and I should say that agenda really was just dominating our work, and it really felt like it was sapping our strength. Shortly before one of our commission meetings, I read an article in Christianity Today, I think, remember this is getting close to 30 years ago, that was exploring whether old mainline denominations could be revitalized or not. The author had used the imagery of Abraham and Sarah and the two producing a son in their old age. Now, I don't remember exactly the context of the conversation, or even much more about the conversation that I had with some staff members. I think it was over lunch or a break or something like that. And we were discussing how one might bring revitalization into a structure such as ours that was in such a state of flux. And I mentioned this article and how this person had offered that maybe Abraham and Sarah could still have a child. Now, I'm not taking credit for what unfolded in any way. I don't even think I sparked much of anything other than maybe they went and read the article for themselves. But at our next commission meeting, there was a proposal, and it was called the Abraham and Sarah Project. Now, again, staff also felt that we were getting sidetracked from our mission by the important conversations, they were important, and the tensions in trying to put together multiple boards and multiple programs from two different denominations who were structured very differently with different corporate cultures and all of that together. So their idea was to challenge the old churches and the area conferences to birth 50 new churches. And that they thought maybe that might take 5 years. And the commission members enthusiastically endorsed staff's idea. So the challenge went out. And it didn't go as they had envisioned. Because within 2 years, 50 churches had been planted. And there were more on the way. Did the Abraham, well, maybe I should say I'm departing from my notes here. Yeah, Abraham and Sarah indeed could have offspring, or as one person quipped, Abraham and Sarah discovered the joy of reproduction. Once again. Did the Abraham and Sarah Project move the integration transformation agenda, or I should say remove the integration transformation agenda? Nope. But it reframed it. Rather than come at that agenda from a position of mistrust and questioning, we were able to come at that agenda from a position of strength and mission. So my hope for VMC is this, that we can grieve our losses in a healthy way, take the necessary time to heal, and then move on into the new that I believe that God has for us. Because like Abraham and Sarah, VMC at 200 still can reproduce. We have a message of hope. We have communities of grace, joy, and peace already present. My hope is that after our time of healing and transitional ministry, we move into that future where God's power and love are experienced and celebrated at each gathering of every congregation and at every conference assembly. Will our disagreements and tensions we feel go away? No. We will, however, have a different context and a different framework. Rather than approach our important agenda from a position of mistrust and longing for something different, we can deal with our differences from the context of mission and ministry.
Good morning. It's been a long time since I've been at an annual conference. I've been retired for 6 years. And so there's a lot of new faces here. I saw John David Thacker back there. Hadn't seen him for years. He was an intern under me when I was pastoring in Elkhart, Indiana. And so it was nice to reconnect. I too resisted this invitation. You have a bunch of resistors here in the Mennonite Church. But really, what really caught my attention, what drew me into it, was the fact that Sarah and the Conference Council were highlighting their priority of resourcing pastors and congregations so that we will thrive. And that called me into it. My piece of the Conference Leadership Team pie is to strengthen the leadership role of pastors, and also to equip congregations, those congregations who sense a call to their neighborhood community or their town or their city. In Hebrews 12, the end of the chapter, it has caught my attention. Everything in the world is shaking, and God is in the shaking. And if I had to read between the lines, it almost seems like God is causing some of the shaking. Because the shaking will reveal what is lasting and what is temporary. And the Hebrew writer of Hebrews says, we serve in an unshakable kingdom. Thanks be to God. Let us worship God. I've had regular conversations with a Methodist pastor from Raleigh, North Carolina, where we used to live, maybe for 6 years or so. And maybe some of you can identify with this pastor's feelings about being involved in the shaking of this world. In February, he said, I don't know whether I'm leading or should lead out of Exodus 17 or Matthew 10. I said, well, tell me. He said, Exodus 17 is a story where Moses, when he holds his hands up, God's people win the battle. And his hands get tired and they start drooping, and God's people lose the battle. And so he raises them again, but it's too much. And finally his supporters who are around him put his arms on the rock, and he can keep them up, and God's people win the battle. Matthew 10 is when you go to a community and a village and they refuse to listen to you, you leave and wipe the dust off your feet. He said, I don't know whether I'm in Exodus 17 or Matthew 10. And maybe some of you have experienced that. And a couple months later we talked, and his demeanor was completely different. He said, I can't believe it. He said, there have been 3 groups that work with disabled folks up through the generations. One is the Larch community that works with profoundly disabled people. They have come and they said, we want some space in your church. And this is a big church. And 2 other groups about the same time came. One works with children, one works with teenagers. And he said, the trustees, they didn't even ask me. It will take them over $100,000 to change their congregation to ADA standards, change their building. And he said they were excited about it. They didn't blink their eyes. And so that demeanor was changed. And then just recently talked again. And he said, it feels like I'm in a battle. And not only in one arena, but several arenas. He said, I'm in a battle at my home with my wife and family. I'm in a battle with my staff, working things through. I'm in a battle with the congregation. The attendance is declining. The giving is down. And he says, I am a child of a Marine family. My father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. And ever since I become a Christian, I vowed that I would be a peacemaker. How do you fight a battle as a peacemaker? How do you pray? And I said, maybe it'd be good for you to meditate on Ephesians 6, verse 10 following. Put on the spiritual armor. We don't fight against flesh and blood, but against rulers and authorities and the cosmic powers of this present darkness and the spiritual forces of heavenly places. Stand firm. Put on the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, and for your shoes, put on whatever will help you spread the gospel of peace. Take the shield of faith and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word, and stand firm. So it'll be interesting to see how God speaks to him through this time. So our team is to help the pastors and congregations thrive. My piece is to strengthen the call and role of pastoral leaders. I don't have a template. I don't have a formula. I'm not going to lay my experience on you, although I've had good experience. But I recognize that we live out of a well. We can only give what we have been given. We have life experiences that are profound gifts. We have families that are gifts. We have our own spiritual journey that's a gift. I remember 6 months after I was in the pastorate, my first pastorate. Look, I had 3 good years of seminary education. I had a quarter of clinical pastoral education. I had almost a year of full-time internship in a congregation where I had a wonderful supervisor and mentors. And in 6 months, it felt like I shot my wad. I didn't know what to do. And then I realized I needed to start praying. And I didn't minister out of my expertise, but out of my relationship with Jesus. And so that's what we want to find. What is the well spring that will come up, that will sharpen leadership, and that you can identify and choose as your piece? And God is the gardener. He will prune us so that we will become more fruitful. So your congregation has spiritual strengths. It has the strengths of community care. It has strengths of ministry. And your job is to raise up those gifts as a leader. I've had a profound prayer that came to me when, let me take this thing off, I forgot. Now you can see my teeth. I still have most of them. One of our sons was going through a difficult time as a young adult, making bad choices. And this prayer came to me. Jesus, open my eyes to see him as you see him. Open my ears to hear him as you hear him. Interesting how emotional many years later this comes. And open my heart to love him as you love him. That became a vital prayer as a pastor for my congregation. And it also became a vital prayer for how we see our neighborhoods and our communities around us, so that we begin to see them as God sees them and hear them as Jesus hears them and love them through the Holy Spirit. So the second part of my task is to walk with churches who feel the call to be Jesus in your neighborhood. or in your city or in your rural community. And that prayer is a valuable prayer, or prayers like that. And I think you will discover the unshakable kingdom of God in the midst of these neighborhoods and communities. And you can join the kingdom and the kingdom of work. I don't come with a template or a plan or a program, but I work organically. Each pastor and each congregation is unique and special in your own way. So one of my friends said, if you've seen one Mennonite church, you've seen one Mennonite church. You are gifts to the life and work of Jesus where you are planted. And stand firm there. And I really hope to see, we have not met as a leadership team, Craig, so you'll have to kind of, handle this. But I hope we can see ourselves as resourcing networks and connections between pastors who have similar experiences, or some leaders who have gifts that would be helpful for this other pastor or other place and congregation the same way. Because 15% of my time? Are you crazy? We all need to work together at this.
All righty. Somehow I missed the notes kind of thing. Here. Oh, Sarah, let me borrow yours. Okay. So, where do I start? I have loved seeing this weekend happen. Our prayer from the visioning team was to see that we could come into conversation and not just see each other from a distance of us and them, and well, they believe this, and the finger pointing, but that we could come and see each other as humans, as people, and we can look at each other in the eye, and we could see that everyone here is out to serve God to the best of their understanding. Even though we may differ on some topics, but we are all here, all committed to Jesus. And I would like this to be a springboard going forward. For the churches that are represented here, for the districts that are represented here, for the clusters, take this back and spread this to your district, to your churches, to your clusters. Spread this news that we have come together and that we are working together. And that's my prayer.
Well, good morning, all. It's good to be here and to be able to consider this role. When Sarah called me, I said I need a little time to think about, pray about. I've been working many, many years, and so I had settled that I was not going to take on a lot of additional responsibilities. But this interested me, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the church is important. The church means a lot to me. Being a part of this church is very special to me. And so as I pondered that, and as I thought about how I could add my piece along with this wonderful team, because again, if it had just been me, I would have definitely said no. But because it was such a nice team of people coming together, I was open to participate in that. So what is my vision for VMC? My father's grandmother, who was my great-grandmother, Jenny Bell Jackson, initiated a Mennonite Brethren church plant in Beach Bottom, North Carolina, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, about 3 miles east of the Tennessee state line. I visited there about 2 months ago to that original site to lay to rest my last living great aunt. The history of that moment spoke deeply to me as I bathed in the legacy of the memories of the pioneer spirit that started this journey for my family. That little one-room church was the pebble in the pond of time that has impacted ministry globally because a woman of God who was determined to build an Anabaptist church in an isolated community. That effort has resulted in me becoming a fourth-generation Anabaptist, and now my children are fifth generation, and my grandchildren sixth-generation Anabaptists. But I'm often asked this question, why are you Mennonite? And the reality is I get asked that more so by Mennonites than non-Mennonites. And my response is this, it's in my DNA. Calvary Community Church was built on the basis of breaking generational barricades and creating new paradigms and opportunities to have a church that is relevant in our local and in our global community. Our church started out as a Sunday school mission project in the east end of Newport News. But it too, like Beach Bottom Mennonite Brethren Church, is still impacting our community and world with a relevant Christ-centered message. My vision for VMC as a minister of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to create a church where my children and my children's children, and as well as every person of color, will never have to answer the question, why are you a Mennonite? Instead, I would challenge us to consider specific conversations or situations where each of us can be exposed to new ideas and new perspectives and learn how to walk in someone else's shoes and encourage those who may feel like outsiders that they too are a part of God's Anabaptist family. And just maybe we will discover something new about ourselves and also about others. So I'm calling us in this new role that I'll be working in to commit to being the change that we want to see, that we intentionally and purposefully live out Isaiah 58, where the prophet says, I will show you where to go, and I will give you a full life in the emptiest of places, firm muscles and strong bones. You'll be like a well-watered garden, a gurgling spring that never runs dry. You will use the old rubble of past lives to build anew and rebuild foundations out of your past. You will be known as those who can fix anything. Restore the old ruins, rebuild and renovate, and make the community livable again. So what is my hope? Not to build my church, not to build your church, not even to build their church. But my hope is that we can build a church where God himself will feel welcome and he would want to attend. Because we were left with this thought by the Apostle Paul. There is neither Jew nor Greek, bond or free, male nor female, for we are all one in Christ Jesus. That's my hope.
last but not least. I don't know what surprised me more, that my name was on the list for this role, or that I said yes to it. I guess, as you've heard from the others, we are in good company with the prophets who all said, "Who, me?" Next month marks the 5th anniversary of the white supremacist rally and the trauma of August 12th in Charlottesville. In the past 5 years, I've been an active member of the Charlottesville Clergy Collective, engaging in anti-racism work around the trauma of August 12th and beyond. 5 years of addressing pain, trauma, injustice in a diverse group of faith leaders, working toward beloved community. Whether in monthly meetings, on subcommittees, or one-on-one. It takes time. It takes commitment. I see many parallels in the work before us in Virginia Mennonite Conference. One of the scriptures I keep going back to is Genesis 1. In the beginning, when God created heaven and earth, the earth was tohu wabohu, formless, void, and empty, wilderness, wasteland. In Germany, we use the word tohu wabohu to denote chaos. While the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. God's Spirit hovered to create, to give life, to give breath. I trust and I know that God's Spirit still hovers over the chaos, our chaos, to give life, to give breath. My hope for Virginia Mennonite Conference is that we pay attention to God's Spirit hovering. Chaos is wilderness, and on the wilderness journey, God forms his people. In the presence of God, through the presence of God. My hope is that God still goes before us in the wilderness of our journey, as he did for God's people for 40 years. I do hope our journey won't take 40 years. I have committed to 2. From my work with the Charlottesville Clergy Collective, I know that the journey ahead will be messy. Wilderness is never linear. There is no clear map. There will be times when we will be uncomfortable, where we will grumble and yearn for the flesh pots of Egypt. There will be times where we will go in circles. Hopefully, we will resist building idols. We will get stuck, and the only way out will be through prayer. I also know that God will show up and make a way, and it will be amazing, because it will be clear that it is not our doing, but God's doing. I remember being on the committee that worked on the first anniversary worship service for the Charlottesville Clergy Collective. There were some people that always showed up late to the meeting. There were some people that always left early. From one meeting to another, you could have an almost completely different committee. There were many times where we thought, how in the world are we ever gonna get anything done? And yet it happened. And when afterwards we looked at each other and we were amazed because God had shown up. I have committed to this work for 2 years. They're gifts I bring to this journey as a pastor, a spiritual director, an artist. We, as a team, have committed for 2 years. We cannot do this work alone. It will take each one of us here at Virginia Mennonite Conference. Are each of you willing to commit to this work for 2 years? Are you willing to bring your gifts to the table? That is my hope as we lead these 2 next years.